It's Daryl Turford with the Drivers Project, and we're back with another interview. And if you're like me, your day doesn't start until Dirt Tracker comes out. And I'm with Justin Fiedler, and I'm serious. I'm addicted to his show. I'm one of those low key late model fan, sprint car fans. And his 10 minutes to me is like all I wait for at lunchtime. Justin, welcome to, I guess this isn't a show, but welcome to this interview.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I feel like knowing about you and the Drivers Project and all of this stuff, and actually, I was interviewed for the Driver Project for the website years ago, but have had a lot of respect for what it is that you guys do, and love that you guys got the show going right now with Sam and with JJ, and kind of getting some of the driver perspective on things every week. I think is has been really good.
Yeah, and one thing I've found, we get a lot of feedback from fans that are like, "Man, I really like that show because they tell it like it is, and they tell the truth." Well, the fact of the matter is, we hold a lot back, but you also do too. Could you talk about holding back some information and why it's important with your sources, and just how plugged in you actually are sometimes?
I actually hold a lot back. I probably hold back more than I should, and more than anything, it's like a respect thing. And I try really hard to kind of not do the breaking news thing. I have done it, and I will do it periodically, and I'm obviously not afraid to talk about rumors and some things like that going on, but I'm not like I don't want to steal people's thunder, and other people are like really running like legitimate businesses like on breaking news. And you talk about Jeremy Elliott and Speed Sport, and on the late model side, the Dirt on Dirt guys and Flow Racing. Like, I don't want to step on their toes, and I would much rather be in it. And I've said this before some other places, but I would much rather be kind of the Bill Simmons of the world than be, an Adam Schefter, right? Like, I'd rather be like, okay, well, here's what happened, and here's why it happened, and here's what led up to it, necessarily than being the guy that breaks the news all the time. So I know about a lot of moves before they happen. I mean, I know about moves that are happening literally right now, things that will break in the coming days. But it's partially a respect thing, partially I don't. I feel like it's a slippery slope to go down. But also too, like, sometimes you find out things and it's like if you put it out there immediately, it's going to burn who told you, right? Because sometimes people are telling me things that are very, very close to situations. And I'm not trying to get people in trouble for sharing information, but I do know a lot of things that are going on all the time. I have some really, really good friends in the industry, which I've been around the sports full time since 2013, and I've got friends on the late model side and I've got friends on the sprint car side. And actually, I was just telling you this beforehand, but it's been one of the things that surprised me the most about doing the show is the amount of people that kind of like will send you information or have made themselves available to me as resources. And there are some incredible people on kind of the two main sides of dirt racing who I can ask questions to, like if I don't know what's going on or I don't understand a technical thing or something like that. There are some people I can send messages to immediately, and it's those types of things have been really, really helpful. And I know I'm not going to get everything right all the time, but I'm going to try really, really hard to make sure it's as right as I can make it.
So I didn't. We talked about this off camera, but I didn't make this comment. We have a lot of people come up to us and just start talking to us like they know us, and it takes us like 3 seconds to realize, oh crap, they're talking about the podcast. That's what they're referring to. I feel like what we have, and I feel like what you have, and I'd like you to comment on this, is because someone sees you every day, they feel like they kind of know you. Do you have that same dynamic going on, and that's why they want to contribute? It's almost like they're trying to help their friend.
Yeah, yeah. So the term for that is parasocial relationship. And when you do what we do, that's what people have. Like, right? Like, they see you every day, they hear your voice in their head every single day. So they know you even though you don't know them. And it's one of the things that it took me some time to kind of get used to and prepare myself for is like when I was working in NASCAR, when I would go to the racetrack, I was prepared for people to approach me. And I always said, like, being a pit crew guy in NASCAR is like being Superman. Like, when you put the uniform on, everybody wants to be your friend, everybody knows you. But as soon as you take the uniform off, you're just an anonymous guy again. But in certain settings now, like, I'm not an anonymous guy anymore. And it took me a little while to be prepared for people to approach you when you are out, in certain settings, right? Having people come up to you and want to take selfies with you and have conversations with you and ask you questions. It's like they know you immediately, right? They see your face, they know you. And like for me, I have to be prepared to be like, oh, what's your name? Like, where are you from? Like, do you listen to the show or whatever? Like, you kind of have to have yourself ready for those conversations. And so it definitely took me a little bit of time to get there, but I know, when especially when I go to a dirt track, it's not like on guard is probably not the right way to say it, but you're kind of on guard for those people to approach you. And you notice it now, like when you'll walk by a group of people in the pit area and they kind of look, and they're like, and then they start walking over, and you're like, okay, well, they recognize me from TikTok or they recognize me from YouTube or whatever, and they want to have a conversation. But it's great, honestly. Obviously, one of the reasons I love dirt racing so much is the people, and having those people approach you and want to ask questions and want to understand better. It's one of my favorite things, honestly, about it. It's just it took me a little while to get used to that.
Yeah, I can be having like an absolute shit day on the car, and if someone walks up and says like, "Hey, I love your podcast," like once it takes me 3 seconds to figure out their, it's like drop the wrenches and like your day's brightened immediately.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
So one thing I really like about Dirt Tracker is I feel like you give very well reasoned, very logical takes on almost everything that happens in the sprint car and late model world. So we've heard extreme takes. We see it a lot on our social media page. So let's get into your takes on some of the ride swaps. The first ride swap that we really saw was Spencer Baston going to the 14. On our podcast, we talked about this maybe being a make it or break it ride for Spencer. He's he will now have been in two elite rides. He's certainly shown speed, but not racked up a lot of wins. What are your thoughts on if it's a make or break it ride, and what are your thoughts in general?
I kind of agree with you. I do think this is, his real big opportunity. I feel like we don't know who Spencer Basin is right now. Like we know he's capable of winning big shows and with the Outlaws and things like that, but obviously we haven't seen that consistency. I don't know, and I have known, you know, the Jacksons for a long time. I'm Facebook friends with Natalie Jackson and have had plenty of conversations with her over the years. But like, I just don't know how I view the CJB car right now. That car just has not been what it was since David Gravel was in it, right? Like Brent Mark struggled in that car. Paul McMahon did okay in that car. We haven't seen much out of Baston. So it's like, is that situation because of Baston or is that situation because the CJB5 just isn't what it was? And so like, I don't know that we have seen a fair shot of what Basin can be. But I do think knowing the resources that are behind the 14 car and having an experienced crew chief like Noisy on that deal, Basin's going to have all the tools to be successful. So if he doesn't do it here, I don't know where else he could do it because I mean Jason Myers is going to be as prepared a guy as there is. This guy knows what it means to win one of these championships, and in the course of Donnie Schatz's incredible run is effectively the only guy at that point that was able to beat him 2 years in a row. And obviously Pittman got one in there too. But I mean, Myers is, there's nobody else on the planet, that's running a car right now that knows how to win an outlaw championship or, win a national touring championship like Myers does. So I like Baston. I think he works well for that ride. He's clean cut. He's well spoken. He's a good looking kid. But I do think we need to see some things from him this year, and I think we need to see them pretty early. He ran those couple of narc shows, and did okay, right? Like they weren't bad. It's obviously going to take him a little bit of time to acclimate, but I don't know. I definitely think we need to kind of see some stuff out of him this year, and they're going to be looking for that charter, right? That's the whole reason everybody's doing this high limit deal, and they're going to need to be right in the mix for that.
So filling in for Baston in the five or replacing Baston in the five will be Brenham Crouch. Now, usually I hear a lot of things about spoiled rich kid, blah blah blah. I feel like this kid's actually done a pretty reasonable job. He won the IRA championship, and then he really didn't do anything to make us go, "Oh, that little shit." In his first year of high limit, he didn't win, but I thought he was pretty solid. How do you think he'll do in that ride?
Like this whole idea about the spoiled rich kids and dads writing checks and all of this thing. I have two things to say to this. Number one, I don't know how many people out there that are listening to this have kids. I have a 10-year-old son. I am working my ass off every single day to try to give my son every possible opportunity. So, like, how can we fault Leighton Crouch for wanting to give his own son the best possible path and easiest possible path to things? Because I'm literally doing the exact same thing for my son. Um, also along with that, right? Like as somebody who has worked in motorsports, I would much rather a team take a check from somebody than shut down completely, right? If that means another car on the road and more crew guys are going to be, employed, and maybe this is an opportunity for Brenham to learn and get better, like I'm not going to fault anybody for writing a check and getting in a car. I like motorsports has literally never been about every single car in every single situation is going to have the best possible driver in it. Like since motorsports was around, you've always been able to write a check and get in a car. It doesn't matter whether you're in a midget or a sprint car or a late model or in Formula One or NASCAR or anything else. You've always been able to do that. I don't know why all of a sudden people think that's a new thing, because it is absolutely not. You're going to have the top guys be in cars, right? Like that's always going to happen. But there's also going to be a subset of teams that are going to take those checks, and we can't fault them for doing that. I would much rather the CJB5 continue with a driver like Brenham Crouch in it than for it to go away completely.
And to back up your point, what we said on our podcast is that's the smart way to do it. Do you want to start your own team and spend $750,000 to $1.5 million and have no base to start on, not know what you're doing, and have to build from there? Or would you rather give less money and go to a team that knows what the hell they're doing and already has a program in place? To me, it's silly. And then on top of that, chances are the person, if it's not a ride that someone's in and you're cheering for that person, the odds are they probably bought that ride.
Hmm. Well, and we're at a point now where in a lot of instances, and in most instances, like somebody is bringing a couple of engines, somebody is bringing a little bit of funding or a sponsor or something like that. There are very few situations where a driver's just getting called and they're like, okay, come drive my car, and they're not bringing anything to the table. That just doesn't happen. And I think that's probably one of the interesting things right now that's probably not being talked about enough is just how some of these deals go together. And it's whatever, Sunday night, November 3rd, as we talk right now, and Scotty Thiel just is out of the 73 car as of Friday, right? But Scotty Thiel isn't really out of the 73 car. All of that equipment is his equipment. Like the 73 and the sponsorship and all of that stuff, like the number and some of the resources are going in a different direction with Logan Julian, but Scotty Thiel still, like, he's the one that owned all of that stuff. And I think people don't realize sometimes how some of these deals actually work and how some of this thing is actually put together. Very rarely is it just a team owner calling a driver and hiring them. Like unless you're Donnie Schatz or David Gravel or Carson Macedo, like those top guys, that's just not how these deals work, especially, kind of mid tier and lower tier and some of these other series. That's just not how it works.
Yeah, and to be honest, my car owner is one of those rich car owners with a rich daughter. And I listen to so many people like trash our team for the rich daughter and they forget our car owner also puts Sam in the car for free. He also puts Dylan Westbrook in a car for free. What more do you want him to do? He's funding two teams compared to his daughter.
But it's his
And the
money. If
pop
he wants to put his driver in the or put his daughter in the car, it's his money. He's the one spending it.
and will you be shocked if Leighton Crouch still runs the 11? Because I won't be.
No, not at all. There is chatter out there that there have been people inquiring about that car still being potentially out on the road, and bringing funding to that car, right? Like I would not be shocked if that continued.
To me, that's the most sought after ride there is.
Yeah, I mean it's winning stuff, right? You saw Buddy Kofoid and Corey Eliason win races in those cars.
So the other big move was Zeb Wise getting dropped by the Rudine team and Justin Peck going in there. What are your thoughts on that? And where would you like to see Zeb Wise go? What do you think would be a good marriage for him?
I don't know. I hate it for Zeb because I really really like that kid. He's a good kid. He's shown himself to be fast. You don't win an All-Star championship, an Outlaw show, and a bunch of All-Star races if you don't know how to drive a sprint car. I don't know what they were missing this year. I don't know if it was him. I don't know if it was the team and the crew chief. I don't know if it was some sort of combination. I know Zeb has opportunities. I know he's had some calls. Where exactly he ends up, I don't know, but I do think that he is national tour capable, national tour caliber driver. I hope he lands something. I think he's a good driver, a good personality for the sport. He's one of the nicest guys you will meet in the pit area. And on the flip side with Peck, Peck is a gasser, man. Like you're not going to get a guy that's going to drive a sprint car harder than Justin Peck does. And I think you're going to find out pretty quickly whether that situation was driver or whether it's team, because We know Peck won with High Limit last year, and finished in the top, top of the series, whatever, top 5 or 6 in the standings, and we know what he's capable of. It still blows me away to this day that Justin Peck does not have a World of Outlaws win. Like, I don't know how that guy has not, at the very least, lucked into one at this point. I've said, I think I said it a year or two ago, but Justin Peck continues to be the best driver in sprint car racing that doesn't have an outlaw win. But and again, we talked about resources with the Myers car, right? Like the 26 Rudine car does not lack for resources. Kevin Rudine is going to provide the best of the best for his team and his guys, and we know that won't be an issue with Peck this year. So, I hope Peck has success. I like him as a driver. I think he's fun. He's also a good character. I think sometimes maybe people are a little rubbed the wrong way with the drinking beer and stuff in victory lane, but like, man, that's just who he is. And I think he's better off when he gets to be who he is. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. I probably need to send Zeb a text and just see if he'll tell me anything, because I haven't talked to him in a week or two, but I probably need to.
So on the podcast, we say Justin Sanders is the best guy that hasn't won an Outlaw show. So that'll
I
be
can see
interesting
that.
to watch. I think it'll be interesting seeing Sanders or Peck who wins an Outlaw show first.
Yeah, I feel like I want to see a little bit more out of Sanders first. My issue with Sanders is, he did okay in a couple of opportunities, with Swindell, with in the Macri car, but I don't know, like he's obviously coming off the NARC championship, and I know the situation he's in with that Mitri car. It's basically him. Like he's doing a lot of that stuff himself. He's doing a lot of the work in the shop himself. But I want to see him run a little bit better when the Outlaws and High Limit come to town. Like, there's no reason why he shouldn't win one of those shows, out there and on tracks that he knows really well. And like, the one thing I will say about Peck is just experienced in a lot more parts of the country. And if I were hiring a driver right now, just because of that experience, I would probably take Peck over Sanders. What's interesting though is I know that there have been phone calls to Sanders over some deals, and he has turned a lot of them down, which I find interesting. But I think unless it's like the right deal, you probably won't see him leave California, because I think he likes the situation he's in out there, and he can continue to win out there for sure.
So one thing that happened this weekend was we had Danny Dietrich promote a race at Bridgeport. It did quite well. And just off the top of my head, I find a lot of the races promoted by racers tend to be successes. Or even if they're not successes, they should have been. They've been enjoyable events. Do you think we're going to see a trend towards more of that? Like, it's always existed, but it seems like it's being done pretty well lately. Do you think we'll see more of that?
I think it's I think it depends on the guy, right? Like, I think certain guys have a bit of a nose for the promoting side, the promotion things, putting the right people together, the right racetracks together. I think a lot of drivers are probably not interested in that side of things. They want to drive, they want to, sling t-shirts, and that's what they're good doing. But obviously you see that with Brad Sweet right now. Like, he starts out, many years ago, even when I was working at World Racing Group, Brad was promoting outlaw races at Placerville and doing some stuff out there. And then they get control of Chico, and, now they've got High Limit. Like, this has kind of been a natural progression for him. And Dietrich is a guy, he's obviously been around a long time, and he's got one hell of a Rolodex. So when it comes time, to recruit people to come to a race like that, obviously he's going to be able to get the top guys to show up. And I think you, in your message, I think you mentioned Shane Stewart as well. And Shane is just a guy that's got a ton of respect in the industry, and he's going to be able to kind of do the same things. And I do think there are probably a certain group of guys that are going to continue to be able to do that. But, like, do I see Donnie Schatz promoting races? No, I don't. Do I see Buddy Kofoy doing that? No, I don't. But I think there are guys that have a little bit more business sense, and kind of see the bigger picture and understand the bigger picture. I think we'll be able to continue to have success doing it. And I think that's why you've seen some of the stuff with Brad and Kyle is, those guys were up close and personal with the top races in the country, and the top series in the country, and they obviously took a lot of notes, right? They know what they wanted to change, they knew the people they wanted to hire, and that information and that knowledge is going to go a long way when it comes time to wanting to promote those races.
So the last question I have is actually a question I've saved for someone like you who's very measured and very thought out. I was speaking to my brother who doesn't really know much about racing, and I was kind of explaining the politics of the High Limit and World of Outlaws. And he said to me, well, And it was actually after your David Gravel comments on one of your most recent episodes. It was kind of like a light bulb went off that this could get swung pretty quickly one way. And my brother said, "Well, yeah, if you look at all professional sports, whenever two leagues go to war, one swallows the other one." He said it'll just happen in racing. And then I thought to myself, "Yeah, you're right." And then I thought to myself about the late models, where they have both the World of Outlaws and Lucas Oil late models going. In your mind, do you see High Limit or World of Outlaws eventually swallowing one or the other? Or do you think this is like a late model situation where they can both coexist? And is that something that's different because it's racing and not the other major ball sports?
No, I think I think you'll see it be like what it is on the late model side. It'll be a stalemate. Like there'll be years where it looks like one is better than the other, like, oh, they'll get this track or this event or this driver, and it'll swing back and forth. But um, what this really is a battle between the streaming companies, right? Like this isn't necessarily a sprint car battle. This is a battle between World Racing Group with Dirt Vision and Flow Racing, right? And World Racing Group has figured out a way to be profitable, right? They are, a deep business, right? It's not just the sprint cars, it's not just the late models, but it's dirt car sanctioning, and it's, Volusia Speedway Park and Dirt Car Nationals and Super Dirt Week and all of these different things around the country. And World Racing Group, is owned effectively by two guys, and they're making a profit every year. And I think that's an as you look at this playing out, Flow as a company, Flow Sports overall is a venture backed company, right? Like this is very much in the vein of typical tech startups, right? Where they go out and they raise a bunch of money and they're trying to figure out as they go. And the classic line is you jump off a cliff and build the airplane on the way down, right? And it's like that's where Flow is right now. Like they're trying to figure out how to be a profitable business. They're trying to figure out what the model is that works. And you've seen them experiment in a lot of places, right? They snatched up a bunch of racetracks and had a ton of weekly racing. And it's like, well, now they've pared all of that back, and now that they've only got a handful of series, and then they start their own late model series. Now they've started, effectively their own sprint car series with High Limit, but they're trying to figure out how all of this plays together. But the difference is with Flow and like some of the efforts we've seen in the past to start a sprint car series is Flow has deep pockets. They have raised a ton of money, and their subscription business is going to generate a lot of cash. So they're going to be able to make some mistakes and screw some things up and keep going. And I don't know specifically. Obviously, Brad and Kyle are not going to show me their books, but I would not be shocked if they lost money this year. There's a lot of things to figure out, and a lot of things that they need to understand about what it means to run a business, and they're figuring it out as they go, right? They've got good competition people behind them. They've got the kind of business smarts and sponsorship connections that are on the Flow side. But I don't see us getting to the point where one swallows the other, because for that to happen, you would effectively have to have World Racing Group swallowing Flow, which isn't going to happen, or you would have to have Flow getting to a point where it then swallows World Racing Group. And maybe that is possible in the future, but I think in the moment they would much rather start their own thing and try to run it than go out and acquire a World Racing Group and something that exists already. So I've had this conversation with a lot of friends in the industry, but I think it's pretty clear that you're just going to see a stalemate. And dirt racing as a whole is very segmented, very splintered, right? Like there's no unification in dirt racing, and even when there is, it doesn't last very long. There's too many racetracks, there's too many divisions. It's why you don't see like really solid TV coverage, right? Or major corporate sponsors or things like that in a lot of instances. It's just because it's like things are so splintered and it's very nuanced. And I think that there is plenty of space, plenty of drivers, plenty of racetracks for there to be both series, just like we've seen on the late model side.
Well, I've taken up twice as much time as I was planning to take up, but
That's my fault, though.
you gave great answers, and I didn't want to stop you. Thank you very much for doing this, Justin.
Yeah, no problem. This is see when you have people like me on that are podcast people and media people. I'm going to talk longer. Like I'm not going to give you one word answers.
It's actually funny on the podcast. When I'm editing it, I can look at the audio file, and based on how long the audio file is of a person's answer, I know if JJ, Dom, or Sam answered it. JJ gives the
exactly.
gives the shortest answers, Dom gives the medium answers, and Sam gives the longest answers every time.
Yeah, back in the Open Red days, me and Ross could tell you some horror stories about some of the guests we had on. There are maybe one or two lost Open Red episodes for ones that were just so bad we could not put them out, and me and Ross could not drag answers out of people.
I had one article back when we used to do the driver's project writing where I was just like, I can't write this.
I can't do it.
But thank you very much, Justin.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.